Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Tennis Weekly with Joel, Kim, and Chris. On today's tour catch-up,
Sinner seizes Cincinnati for fifth title of the season,
but the Italian escapes a drugs ban after two failed tests.
and Sabalenka sinks Pegula to rise back to number 2 in the world.
Chris, today is the 20th of August, and we are here to catch up on the week in tennis at Tennis Weekly HQ. We are just 1 week away from the start of the fourth and final slam of the year at the US Open in Flushing Meadow. And it was all hotting up on the tour this week as Jannik Sinner took home his second Masters crown of the season, whilst Aryna Sabalenka rose back up to world number 2 without dropping a set in Cincinnati. It wasn't such a happy hunting ground for Carlos Alcaraz as he smashed a tennis racket for the very first time. Jack Draper and Felix Auger-Alliasime also were involved in what many have been calling one of the most controversial match points of all time. And Jessica Pegula came up just short of achieving a historic back-to-back Masters double in consecutive weeks. Chris, as ever, Cincy has delivered in the build-up to the US Open, but perhaps not in the ways we were expecting.
That is true. I think many of us were not expecting that Jack Draper would be playing the villain on the tour. That's a role we never thought he'd play.
No one's even talking about the fact that Nick Kyrgios is allegedly coming back to a tennis court very soon as well.
Well, he's certainly back on Twitter because he's been talking about the big Sinner news that we'll be talking about in the second half in detail. And in depth. But I mean, first reactions, Joel, it's just happened. It's breaking news. We found out a couple of hours ago. What are your first thoughts?
Oh, it is big, big news, isn't it? I mean, Jannik Sinner, world number 1. Yeah, where did this come from? 2 failed tests. He's in the clear now. He's able to play the US Open. As you say, we're going to get into more detail in the second half. But yeah, I was just in a state of shock. You know, I was seemingly thinking he's back. He's maybe the favorite for the US Open. I don't know. He's playing certainly very, very good tennis. But we're talking about him now for probably all the wrong reasons.
Exactly. And this all happened in March. And when I saw the headline, someone actually shared the article with me. I thought, oh, this can't be right. This would have been out in the public domain, but it wasn't. So I think it's very surprising that everyone's saying we should move on. We should put this behind him. But we've only just found out about it, and it definitely doesn't seem like the full story has been revealed just yet. So we will be unpacking what we know in the second half.
It's the sort of news that if you're going to be able to kind of keep stum or keep it low key for 5 months, you're sort of hoping, I think, to keep it low key until the off season, because it's not ideal. Regardless of how well he's playing, it's not ideal preparation going into the fourth and final slam of the year.
Yeah, I mean, first question in Flushing Meadows after round 1, or even the
no one's going to care about talking about his tennis matches.
Costa Bowl. Talk about that. The issues around that. So we'll talk about it more.
We will talk about it more. We're going to be talking about we're going to stick to the tennis as always in the first half, talking about his triumph in Cincinnati along with Aryna Sabalenka. But Chris, as always, we're just going to lighten the mood first of all, and this is where our irreverent thing of the week comes in. What has caught your eye this week in the world of tennis, just to help us lighten the mood in this episode?
Well, I did message you earlier in the week, Joel, and I said, is it time for an emergency podcast? Because one of your favorites, a certain Alison van Uytvanck, has announced she's hanging up her racket. Career high of 37. She announced on Instagram that she is ending her professional career.
Times. She said, Get the violin out.
Exactly. And I was looking at this, and it's obviously very, there's a lot to celebrate, but I was looking at the pictures that she was sharing of the titles, and Greek Minute doesn't feature. So that's her former partner. So it's
that relationship does run deep, doesn't it? It still feels quite fractious.
It does. Obviously, they used to date, and now they don't.
No, they don't.
And they are both, I think they're both married to other partners or with other people now. Yeah. So they're all happy now, but definitely didn't play a role in this tennis journey post. But Joel, how are you feeling? You must be very sad.
Very, very sad. I mean, one of my favorites, Alison van Uytvanck memories, was when she played Emma Raducanu at Wimbledon. I think in the first round, everyone was describing it in the British press as a horror draw for
Yes.
Raducanu against the Imperious Van Uytvanck. I
Wasn't that
think
because
she's
she just
just
was Ilky or
yeah, or
Surbiton or
Surbiton.
something?
Yeah, she was sort of some grass
The
court
Surbiton Slam.
specialist, and everyone was like hyping her up, building her up as this monster on the grass court. And then
She's handy, but I
he's handy,
mean,
but yeah, the story was sort of it swayed the other
scuppered.
way to Raducanu pretty swiftly.
What caught your eye then if it wasn't Alison Van Uytvanck?
What's that? Sorry.
What caught your eye if it wasn't Alison Van Uytvanck?
Ah, yes. Well, it was another tennis player, and it was Bernard Tomic. Yes,
High
Bernard
ranking
Tomic.
players only.
I know, right? I mean, are we the Challenger podcast? Yeah. I don't know if you saw this, but he was playing a Challenger tournament in the Dominican Republic, and he lost. I know this is the crazy story. He lost to Andres Andrade, who got to the final. I think he lost to him in the quarters. And what did he do? He turned up at the final to support the opponent, Jumhe, one of his friends on the tour. But he also was booing and was cheering against the player who had beaten him in the quarterfinals.
Wow. I mean, that's probably the most Bernard
That's so
Tomic.
petty.
It's
That's so
petty, but it's the
petty.
most Bernard Tomic
I
thing you
sort
can
of love it
imagine.
though. Can you imagine kind of like Rublev, like just
Oh goodness,
like
that would be
getting
a
a
lot.
disguise and going
Like,
into the crowd or something
I
in the
mean,
final?
it is. That's a wild story. I thought the way that was going was that he got disqualified for cheering on or booing someone he was
Well,
going
he
to
was
play.
asked to leave by the organizers, so they did kind of put a stop to it. But it's just a. I mean, it's just
Well,
a.
heckling in tennis is a
Yeah,
problem, but who thought it would be coming from the ranks of their own?
I I know. Maybe, like, yeah. Who knows? Maybe it might happen on the tour. Who do you think would do that? If there's someone, Hugo Gaston, I feel like, or Mute. Mute.
I can see
Let's
the
hope.
French contingent
Yeah,
potentially. You know, they're quite.
Mute. Don't get any ideas, Mute.
What about the Chileans and the Argentinians? Maybe there'd
Mm.
be a little bit of healthy rivalry and noise there. But I mean, what about JPEG and Coco? They said they like to be a trash talk. So maybe they
Very
turn up to
true.
their friends' matches and trash
Yeah,
talk
yeah,
them.
yeah. I
But
could see that. Yeah. Well, we'll see. But yeah, Bernard Tomic in the news for all the wrong reasons. But let's take it up again. Let's move on from the Challenger Tour. Let's look at what's been happening on the ATP and WTA tours at the very top level. We have had the Cincinnati Open, Cincy, as I like to call it, and Jannik Sinner and Aryna Sabalenka are your champions. Chris, let's start with Jannik Sinner. Let's talk about him in the good books. His tennis in Cincinnati. He defeated France's Tiafoe in the final in straight sets, 7-6, 6-2. Yeah, what did you make of Sinner's run? Regardless of all this news that's broken, more recently, what do you make of Sinner's run to the title in Cincinnati?
well, I mean, I'm not going to make reference to the first piece of news, but it did seem like he's recovered well from some of those tougher and
Mm,
longer matches that he faced. I think it was important for him to come out here and get a win. It's been a big question. Is he really the world number one right now? And you could argue his form is more at the
yeah,
start of the year than it was in the second half of the year with
and his health.
and his health, with Alcaraz obviously taking the most recent two slams, Djokovic the Olympics. Australia seems like quite a long time away since a major title.
Mm,
And you have to think that when it comes to some of those big clashes, he has not been winning all of them. So it's a big win for him, especially when you do think about the context of everything he's going through and what would be being revealed. To keep your focus like that and come up with the results, I think I mean, it's resilient, if nothing else. And against Zverev, he found a way. And I think
yeah.
that's a bit more the Sinner that we've seen is that even on days where he might not be playing his absolute best, he still does get the win. He'd found a way to win against so many players at the back end of last year and the start of this year. But he got it done. And that's what you can say is going into the US Open, he has got form. He will definitely be a contender. And the question marks around his fitness have been answered.
Has he played tennis to a level that puts him as outright US Open favorite, or do you think we have a US Open favorite? Do you think he's playing like the world number one, or do you still think there are levels to go?
I think there are levels to go. It wasn't completely clean throughout. He played some
Mm,
really good sets here and there, but there were sets which you felt didn't have to be as tricky or wouldn't have been as tricky
no.
earlier in the year. Um, so in terms of being the favorite, I don't think he will be the favorite. I think Djokovic and Alcaraz would be at 1 and 2. I think he'd be the third favorite going into this.
Mm.
I think that's probably quite a fair assessment because they have obviously won the titles most recently. And despite Alcaraz not having the best of form here and not being thrilled with his form, he has obviously won the results and won the titles where it really mattered.
Yeah, and just a word on Francis Tiafoe because he has had a great tournament, quite a little bit out of nowhere. I mean, he's been on the slide down. He's now back into the top 20. He's had a fantastic run, as I say. He saved 2 match points against Rune in the semi-final. What is it? What's changed? What changed this week with Francis Tiafoe? Because he was coming into the tournament with a 19-18 record on the tour, and that's not the sort of stats we were talking about and relating to Francis Tiafoe just a few seasons ago.
Absolutely. And I think what's so important about this is that playing at home makes all the difference to him. He really is someone who loves performing in front of a crowd, and he really thrives in those sorts of environments, getting his energy from the crowd as well. So I think that's why he has tended to get some of his best results when he is in America.
Yeah.
In terms of the tennis he played, I think winning some of those matches and turning them around the way that he did, his semi-final, he obviously turned that one around to win it, isn't again necessarily a TFO trait. So all of it's looking very positive. And we have talked so much about how talented he is and how much he has to offer in the tennis world from a skill set perspective, but maybe not always in the discipline side of things or the mental sort of harditude that you need to make sure that you aren't going to go away in those key moments. So a big result for him making it to the final. And you're quite a TFO fan, aren't you? I think you always love his style of tennis.
It's an interesting one because he's almost like he's like a next generation Gael Monfils. I think he is an entertainer, but you always kind of look at that type of brand of tennis, whether it's actually got an end product or it's actually going to lead to career success. And I think, a few seasons ago, he was knocking on the door. We were possibly talking about him being, reaching a Grand Slam singles final, and that has gone away. And I think he's gone through some very tough times over the last season and a half. And it's nice to see him, I think, back and using, as I say, being at home, feeling comfortable. I think it can almost work in an opposite way and actually take his tennis back to a level and rediscover that form that he was in those 2 seasons ago, when again he had such a great US Open, nearly kind of went, was getting very far in the tournament, and who knows, maybe he could do it again.
Absolutely. And you mentioned Gael Monfils there. He actually said in an interview that a lot of people think that the showboating he does is because he isn't as focused. He's unserious in those moments. But he's like, no, that's actually just how I win.
It's just a natural, it's just a natural way to play tennis.
He's not making the decision to entertain. He's genuinely making the decision that that's how he's going to get it done. But he did get it done this week in a very big result.
Yeah, against Carlos Alcaraz. Let's talk about this because Carlos Alcaraz lost to Gael Monfils, and he was not a happy chappy on the tennis court because he smashed a racket for the first time. Now, listeners, if you want to go watch this clip, I do recommend it because I think it is textbook way to smash a tennis racket, only for a warning, because he literally had kind of like 4 bites at the cherry, I think, slamming it into the ground. But is there any cause for concern, Chris, around Carlos Alcaraz? The fact that he went out so early to Monfils, and also the manner of the defeat as well. The fact that he smashed his racket, something he's never done before. Is there more we can read into that?
Well, firstly, it was a pretty good racket slam, as you say. Like, if you're gonna smash
that's what we're gonna read into it. Yeah,
do it properly. If you'd done it once and abandoned it, then I wouldn't have been quite as impressed by it. But it's actually quite nice to see him frustrated in some of those moments, because sometimes letting it out can actually be a great way to turn it around. Didn't work out for him in these moments, or in this match. But I mean, if you were someone who could play to the level that he can, and he really was not turning up in that Monfils match. No. It was poles apart from what we've seen in the Wimbledon final, and even as recently as the Olympics. So I understand it. I think obviously this happens. People smash rackets. And the fact this is his first racket smash, I mean, actually, that's probably a very good sign.
Do you think we will see it again in the imminent future, or do you think it was just a one-off?
Will he smash another racket in the future? Yes. But I do love the fact it happens in these moments at like Cincinnati,
Yeah.
as opposed to like in the US Open final or when something really
Yeah.
goes pear
Well,
shaped for
it looked
him.
like it was very close to doing it against Djokovic in the
Yeah.
Olympics final. I did enjoy. He did come out on social media afterwards with an apology, saying, "I apologize because my attitude yesterday was not correct, and it is something that should not be done on the track. I'm
Obviously, Rublev
human."
might need to read
Yeah,
that.
I know. It's funny because you sort of just think of him like, he's looking up to Rafael Nadal, and that's his mentor, that's his role model. And yeah, it's almost like he stepped out the shadow. He was like, no, I'm not going to be Nadal for this moment. I'm going to go and smash my racket.
And he did it. So at least he's breaking the mold now. So
Mm.
he's gonna pave his own way, and that might be
Yeah.
smashing rackets. But very surprising result. It doesn't often happen. I think a lot of us were thinking
No, we were
he'd have
thinking
it.
Sinner. We were
Yeah,
thinking maybe Sinner Alcaraz again. Yes, please, in the Cincinnati final, but that did not happen. But there was one other big talking point on the men's side, and it was the match point, Chris, between Jack Draper, Felix Auger-Aliassime. Now, Jack Draper had a pretty good tournament. If you look at his results, got to quarterfinals. Yeah, defeated Auger-Aliassime in 3 sets to get there. But yeah, we've got to talk about this match point because the umpire ruled in his favor. There's no instant replays. It may have looked like a double bounce. Felix Auger-Aliassime certainly thought it was, but there was no overrule, and Draper walked away with the victory. Now, listeners, again, have a look at the clip and sort of make up your mind for yourself in terms of who you favor. But Chris, what did you make of it?
it took a few watches to
Mm,
really realize what happened. So that's the only thing that I will say. In fairness to the umpire, I do think if you are the umpire and it is that close to you, it should be quite clear what's happened. For an untrained eye, I think sometimes you won't be as certain. I think there are types of spin that are involved that actually mean that certain things have happened, that the ball has not been hit legally in that way. So
mm,
it's all a big mess. I think happening on match point is a shame because then it does feel like the match could have gone another
yeah,
way, even
yeah.
though it was a match point. So I'm not sure that Jack would ever want to
Because
win like that.
it was quite an important moment because I think it was like advantage deuce.
It was tight. It was
Yeah, it
really
was
tight.
tight, and a lot on the line as well for Draper because he's having such a great tournament, opportunity to go places he's not been before. So you could sort of see why he was sort of
Well,
from my perspective anyway. I'm sort of can see why he was sort of not getting involved too much and kind of coming
that's
out
definitely
with.
something that people
Mm,
do. And we'll talk more in the second half as to whether that is necessarily the right thing to do in these
mm,
moments. But for me, the umpire needs to get it right. And this umpire tends to get it wrong at the moment.
I know.
So that's where
Not
I
had
think
a
the
good
real fault is.
not had a good couple of weeks, has he? Greg Allensworth. I don't want to. I don't like throwing umpires under the bus, but yeah, he's given a few rotten calls, hasn't he? With this one,
Terrible.
Taylor Fritz, as well. Also, there was an altercation there,
That was ridiculous. Yes.
and he defaulted Shapovalov, who had his ranking points and money reinstated afterwards. So yeah, it's not been a great time for him, I feel, on the tour. I don't know. It's tough. It's like, I feel like we need to give these umpires like technology and instant replay tools available to them to make their jobs easier because it's
Well, it's
not an easy
happening.
environment. Yeah.
It's happening in the US Open. They are having VAR. So
Wow.
your prayers have been answered
Mm.
and rather quickly. And one person I was going to say who threw their sort of penny's worth into the mix was Sloane Stephens. Normally never gets involved. She goes, serious question. What consequences does the chair umpire face? This is two
Mm.
incidents in two tournaments for the same umpire. Does he go in probation? No end of year bonus. Can't work the next slam. Fine. She's curious. So this is something that really did capture an awful lot of people's and players' attentions because they are currently at the mercy of these umpires making these decisions. And if they get it wrong, as Iga said in Paris, there's a lot of money on the line for the fans if they make
Yeah.
out noises. There's a lot of points on the line as well. So these things matter, and I do think that umpires need to be held to a higher standard because we're seeing more bad calls than good calls at the moment.
I agree. It's yeah, it's interesting. I do want yeah, I feel like they should be under the spotlight. I get that we should be focusing on the players in the tennis, but certainly they need to be under the spotlight a little bit more. I mean, moving on to the women's draw, Aryna Sabalenka is the ladies champion in Cincinnati. Now, she defeated Jessica Pegula in the final 6-3, 7-5. Chris, Sabalenka, what are we thinking? I mean, she defeated Swiatek as well in the semis, didn't drop a set all week. Now, I've been hearing that Cincinnati was the fastest court surface on the tour so far this year. Does that I'm not reading too much into it, but I'm putting two and two together. Fast court surface equals Sabalenka dominance.
Well, it certainly helped for her serve, didn't it? She hit 10 aces and won 91% of first serve points.
It's the story of the week, basically.
It was. She served everyone off the court. I think JPEG said in her on-court interview afterwards that the numbers did sound just like Serena, and playing against her was Serena-esque. So super clean. She hit more winners than unforced errors as well. And it just goes to show that she's very much back and very much in contention, because that result against Anisimova previously at the Canadian Open was a bit surprising. It was very straightforward. It was windy conditions, though. And it was the first match that the first tournament she played since she'd obviously skipped the Olympics as well as Wimbledon because of an injury at Wimbledon. So she's been recovering. So maybe it's hard to hit the ground running in your first tournament, but this was quite a marker to lay down, especially that victory over Iga in the semi-finals.
Yeah, I mean, Iga didn't really get a look in for the majority of it. And I think, you look at Sabalenka's schedule as well, the fact that she chose to skip the Olympics, give herself that time, to bed in. She played DC before going to Canada. Although she didn't necessarily play her best tennis, she's had more time to get herself ready and match it for the US Open. Whereas players like Swiatek, having to juggle less time, but also a different change in court surfaces as well on a shorter time period. So yeah, it almost feels like it's Sabalenka's to gain at the moment. Do you think she goes in as the favorite, or do you still kind of have Swiatek up there, or does this change anything for you?
It's tricky. I think there are probably two favorites in Sabalenka and Iga, because obviously Sabalenka has won the Slam on hard this year. Iga has had obviously great form on hard court. She has won the most major or big titles on hard courts. When it comes to the big 1,000 titles, she has won a lot more than anyone else has on hard courts of active players. So you can't really bet against her in these moments, but her US Open record hasn't always been great.
It's been a bit patchy, yeah.
It has. She's obviously won the title before, but I think it'll be interesting to see, because Sabalenka is playing well. If the conditions are playing pretty quickly in the US Open, I think she should have probably won last year's final. And I think you'd have to think that she would be the pick if she plays her best tennis, I would say.
Yeah, and we know that the conditions, there can be blustery conditions in New York, so that might be a factor. But certainly, I think getting a win over Swiatek in the semis, that I think mentally is going to give her a big confidence boost in terms of coming to New York if that matchup happens again. Yeah, because that head to head, I think it was 8-3 in favor of Swiatek going into it. So the fact that she has the most recent win on a hard court, that's going to be good memories. So yeah, I certainly think that's going to put her in a pretty good position.
Well, she's supposed to say that at the net. She's that we've got to make it interesting, she said to Swiatek apparently. So certainly does make it interesting going into New York.
I mean, just before we go to a quick break, let's just quickly talk on Jessica Pegula, because she has had a fantastic couple of weeks in Canada, I feel, and in Canada and Cincinnati. Champion in Canada, finalist in Cincinnati. Is it possible? Is it possible New York is going to be Jessica Pegula's time, or is she going to need a little bit of luck along with the tennis that she's playing?
I mean, we talked about it last week, and she keeps getting the results and keeps getting deep at these tournaments. But as we've said, it's got to be done at the majors. And I do think she's just one major result away from doing something big. I think maybe Australia might be where she plays her best tennis. She's had some great run in tournaments previously. I do think there's a big chance that she could do well there, because I do think that she does, she picks it up pretty quickly when she's left off or had an injury layoff. But I think it's time for us to see what happens in New York, and then we can reassess.
Yeah.
But she's certainly produced an awful lot of good form since
She's
she has her
definitely,
back on the tour.
yeah, she's definitely put herself in a great position. She had a cracking match against Leylah Fernandez, who was just not going away, was digging deep, and I sort of thought Fernandez was coming back to clinch it. But yeah, Pegula coming through. One final player, Chris. I forgot to mention. I hold my hand up. Apologies here. Paula Badosa.
Yes.
Getting to the semi-finals, unseeded. It's just great to see her back, healthy. We thought, you know what, a month ago she might be calling it quits and retiring from tennis, but to get to the semi-finals, great result here.
It is a great result, and she will be seeded for the US Open, which is big for her. She's had a lot of bad draws, and when you aren't ranked highly, you do get bad draws. But I mean, it's unbelievable what she's doing. She does have the same condition that actually ended Annette Kontovic's career. It is something that will not get better. It will only get worse. And you can manage it, but only to a certain extent. So she's really thinking about it from the perspective that she does have probably maximum of 2 years left of playing tennis. And it's a bit like Danielle Collins in the sense that it seems to be focusing her mind on trying to get some of those results.
Running. The clock is running.
Exactly. Time is ticking. And it's great to see that she is picking up not only titles, but big wins and big results, because she does have the talent level. And it's such a shame she got derailed like that.
Yeah, she is certainly going to be a threat in New York. We're going to take a quick break now, but do join us in the second half where we will be discussing Jannik Sinner, cleared after testing positive twice for a banned substance. And we're going to look ahead as well to the final week before the US Open begins. Winston, Salem, Monterrey, and tennis in the land in Cleveland. So do not go anywhere. Welcome back to the Tennis Weekly podcast. And Chris, it's time, as always, for another game. And last week, it was Joel's game. It was more Chris's game delivered to Joel.
Yes.
And I nearly got there, but I failed towards the end. However, it's your turn now. It's a Joel's game delivered by Joel to you.
Right.
For you and our listeners. Are you ready?
I'm ready. And to remind our listeners, I'm higher or lower?
It is essentially higher or lower on career high rankings. And we're going to start with one player. We're going to put our stake in the ground first of all. And Chris, you might be able to guess there is a theme with my players that I'm going to give you.
Ooh.
And you can probably guess it along the way.
Oh, okay. Along the way.
Yes. And listeners, you can have a think as well. I think it's quite obvious, but we'll see. Right. I'm kind of nervous. We've done this before, but let's just go with it and see what happens. Right.
Yes.
Player I'm going to give you, say, no skin in the game just yet, but Camilla Giorgi, career high ranking.
Oh, have we gone Italian?
We may have.
Well, I mean, she was very, very
recently
good.
Retired Camilla Giorgi.
Well, the question is she was she retired for retirement reasons, or was
tax evasion?
Tax evasion. I think she's been in the top 30. I'd say 28.
Very close, actually. 26 career high Camilla
Rogers
Giorgi.
Cup winner.
Okay, right. First player, higher or lower than career high 26, Lorenzo Sonego.
Ooh.
Yeah, I'm pulling no punches here. I'm getting tricky very early on.
That's really not easy.
Lorenzo Sonego, is his career high ranking higher, lower, or same than 26?
I'm actually really not sure. I think you might have made this a bit too hard, a bit too quickly. I'm going to say higher, but I'm not convinced at all.
Okay. Higher?
Higher, maybe 23.
Higher is correct. Very well done.
Thank goodness.
Career high 21.
Well,
so
good for him.
Just outside the top 20. Right, you're on the board. So next player for you is Fabio Fognini.
Oh, he's been way higher.
Higher?
I feel like he might have been top 10.
Number? Got a number for me?
Maybe I'll go 8.
Correct. He has been higher, career high number 9. So he has been in the top 10.
This is
So
going
very well
It's going
done.
well, yes.
Yeah. So that's 2 correct answers so
How many did
far.
you get last week? 3
Oh, was it 3? Yeah,
or
I think it
4?
was 3 or 4. 3 or
Okay.
4. Right.
3's fine.
Okay. It's getting a bit trickier now. Next player for you, Matteo Berrettini. Higher,
I think he's
lower,
been higher.
or same than career high 9?
I think he's been higher. But I mean, this could be a trick question. I think he's been higher. I think he's been maybe 5.
Higher is correct. Very good. Yes. Matteo Berrettini has been a career high of 6.
Oh, not that high then. Yeah.
Yeah. There you go. Maybe we'll see him back in the top 10 at some point. I hope so. Right. Okay. That's 3 correct answers. It's getting trickier now. I've gone slightly rogue with this one. Roberta Vinci's singles career high ranking.
I think it might be number 7.
Higher, lower, or same than 6?
I honestly think it's number 7, so I'm going to say lower.
That is absolutely spot on. Career high 7.
I don't know why I know that.
Singles. That is so random.
I just know it.
Wow. Okay, so that's 4. You're very close.
I don't think I've won this individually.
Ooh. Okay. Right. The next player for you is Flavia Pennetta.
I think she's been number 4, so I'm going to say higher.
Higher?
Yes.
Correct. Very good. She's been a career high 6.
6
in the world. Yes.
That's mad. You won a slam.
Yeah. So Pennetta has been higher, but career high 6. Right.
Oh, who have we got?
Here we've got.
Is this for the win?
This is to complete Joel's game. Very important moment. Okay. So Flavia Pennetta, career high 6. The player I'm going to give you is Francesca Schiavone.
Oh, I think she's been higher. Maybe she's been 4. I don't know why I keep on just thinking everyone's been 1 or before. I think she's been higher. And I'm going to say higher 4.
Is that your final answer?
Yeah, final answer.
That is correct. Well done. You have won Joel's game. Very, very well done. And you're right. Schiavone career high number 4.
Well, now we all know. I mean, I hadn't really thought about that many Italians being in the top 10, but what a tennis nation.
Well, there you go. There you go. Very well done. Listeners, let us know how you got on. Did you get 100% like Chris?
100%. Well, maybe you got every ranking right as well.
Yes. Maybe I should have brought in some more niche Italian players. Maybe I'll come back for round 2 at some point in the future. But let's move on to the Tennis Weekly mailbag, because Saif got in touch with us on email from the Netherlands. This is quite a long question, Chris, from Saif in the mailbag, but I'm gonna do my best. Right. Going by what several current and former players have said, it seems Jack Draper would know the ball bounced on the court after hitting his racket. I fully acknowledge that it was the umpire's decision to make. Jack was not obliged to speak the truth, as he knew it, and give the point to Felix. It's professional sport and you are there to earn your living. However, when players do that, they should lose the right to say things like, I want to inspire children and young players, and so on. You cannot have it both ways. If they try to, they should be called out for it. Ditto for players who routinely behave poorly on court and then claim they want to inspire future generations. That's not true. They only want to win tennis matches, and they should be told to shut up when they claim otherwise. What are your thoughts on this? I'm out of breath.
That is a wordy one, but thank you so much, Saif, for that one. I do think that you are in 2 minds, because if you do stay quiet, it is not your job, technically. I think we've all been in situations where we've said, you know what, this is not my job. It's not my remit. I'm not able to control what the decision-making will be. And it doesn't necessarily feel like it's for you to always say. So I do understand that side of things. But I do also believe that you can be in a situation where you don't necessarily know what's happened. And sometimes players do not know the rules well. So some players think that things are not okay. The rule is quite often, if it's one motion, then it counts. So some people don't even know that. They'll say she did a double hit. She leant over the net. You're not allowed to lean over the net, and all these sorts of things because people don't actually know. Or Sharapova once thought that she would get another serve back, a first serve back, because the challenge took so long, and all sorts of things like this. So I think there can be confusion amongst players when it comes to it. So it's not necessarily as clean cut as this. But I do think if you behave badly, then definitely you cannot say that I'm a role model. And that's what I issues quite often with Rublev. But I also don't think that Jack Draper was lying. I think he was also not 100% sure what happened. And if you're not 100% sure, then he didn't want to call himself out on it. So it is tricky. It is a job. It is a career.
It's not black and white. I just
it isn't
don't
black
think
and white.
it's black and white. And I think also the other thing is I think players mature, they learn, they grow from experiences, and something they do, as a junior growing up, or in their first year as a rookie on the tour, might be completely different to how they they react or go about a situation as a veteran on the tour. So I certainly also think that that plays, and people evolve, people change. So yeah, but I sort of get that it's hard, and I think particularly in the moment when it's competitive and you want to win and there's a lot on the line, it can maybe blur and
Cloud your
impair
judgment. Yeah.
decision making.
Is this a mark on Jack's record, do you think, or his
Ah,
character? Because we've spoken to him, I've met him multiple times. I think
yeah,
he's a lovely, charming bloke. Should he have just said
I think
something?
I'm going to be bold, Chris. I think he knew. I think the way it happened, I think he knows that he double bounced it into the ground. The way he motions with his racket afterwards makes me think that he doesn't think it's going to go over the net, and he's trying to push it over the net again because he knows the point is up. So I sort of think deep down he knew what was going on, but maybe his judgment was clouded by, as I say, what was at stake and the fact that
Not
it was
wanting to
so.
call it.
No, he
Yeah.
was not wanting to call it, and he was sort of hid behind the fact that this was the umpire's call and not his.
It will be a
Having
lesson learned, though, I think, right?
Yeah, exactly. Having said that, again, I'm not a tennis player. It all happens so quickly. That's why I think we can just clear up these situations with instant replay, VAR, whatever you want to call it, and we can just move on as quick as possible because the fact that we don't have it, we don't have that finality. It's just
True.
like, yeah. And
Also,
fans are sort of
yeah.
left, they're just left with a sour taste in the mouth, I
And
think, with the way it's finished.
and being honest is not actually a prerequisite for being a tennis player at all. That is not anything to do with it. Someone else should be making those decisions. But
Yeah.
I can say, as a very amateur tennis player, that I do think you would know.
Yeah.
And I think that we can agree on that. But
It's the spirit of cricket debate, I think, in spirit of tennis. But we'll live on. I'm sure there's going to be more.
Yeah.
There's going to
Something
be
that isn't
more.
in the spirit of tennis, Joel, is Jannik Sinner.
Yeah,
Maybe.
I know, right? I know. Just actually, very quickly, I will say the one person who has come out of it, I think, looking the best is Felix Auger-Aliassime, because
So
he didn't get
classy.
angry. Yeah, he didn't get angry. He's had a polite conversation. He obviously wasn't happy with the decision, but he was able to just sort of move on, put a very classy statement on social media, and I thought that was that was the correct way to go about it. If there was a blueprint,
There was nothing negative about Jack. He moved on. He accepted it. He was very reasonable, and I think that yeah, he's very classy.
Yeah. Right. Okay. Let's move on. Deep dive time now into Jannik Sinner. The big breaking news from today, from Tuesday. I'm going to do a very, very quick update on what's happened. So Jannik Sinner, he's tested positive for a substance called I'm going to say it wrong, clostebol. This was in 2 different urine samples on March 10th and March 18th. He was exposed through a full body massages from his physio. There is no fault or negligence that has been found on Jannik Sinner's part. That is from the International Tennis Integrity Agency. He does lose his ranking points from Indian Wells, so 4,000 ranking points, and his prize money, which he got to the semi-finals. But yes, Chris, let's go into a bit more detail now. Where do you stand on this now, having had a bit more time to think about it? What does this do for Jannik Jannik Sinner's reputation, if anything? How much does this sort of dent it, or does it not?
Well, I think we should maybe unpack a little bit more what happened in terms of the chain of events as well, because this is quite an odd one. Obviously, you mentioned the massage side of things. This is his physio who's exposed it to him, who said that he applied the over-the-counter spray available in Italy to a cut in his hand and then carried out these treatments on Jannik Sinner. This was accepted as an explanation. He appealed both of the failed tests, which meant that he did not get a suspension from play and was able to play in Miami and win the title. So that is obviously quite tricky for people to stomach, that this is the order of events: two failed tests in 2 weeks and then allowed to play in Miami without sort of the long drawn out investigation that we're used to seeing from some of these things. And it's such a different handling than we've seen from the Simona Halep case, from the Tara Moore situation. And it does make you think the way that we've been told now doesn't sit right, because
Are there different rules for depending on your ranking?
There's definitely top player privilege.
Different treatment, yeah.
I think there can be, and in the history of the sport, it does tend to be on the side of the men who do get the special treatment. Sharapova obviously didn't, but this is relatively similar in the sense that the nature of the performance enhancement of this is, and how much was in the system, doesn't necessarily lead it to believe that it would be doping rather than more of a medical thing, but that was being put on by his physio. But I do have to say that there are some question marks here, because the reason why I have a personal issue with this is because
hit me.
If you are a physio, you have an open wound. Are you then not dressing your open wound, and then you are massaging like Jannik Sinner with your cut exposed? And Jannik Sinner has also said, as part of what I read in the report, that he does have a condition that means he does tend to get scratches and some grazings on his body, and lesions, he calls them. So if you know this and you've cut your hand, you're his physio, you're very much familiar with his body. Also, professionality is that you would always cover that. It doesn't make sense to me. It doesn't ring true. And I think where there are those sorts of things that don't make sense, you do have to question it. I mean, we're talking Sara Errani's mother's lasagna with the heart medication in. We're at that level of stretch here.
I mean, that's what the sort of the jeopardy, isn't it? Because as you said, those situations, you sort of wonder, like, how long is it going to take or what is going to happen? It just doesn't feel like there's any sort of consistency.
No consistency. And I also think it's part of a very smart way of handling it from the ATP perspective, as well as potentially the ITIA, but also Jannik Sinner, in terms of
he's world number one.
It. Well, he's number one, but he said don't talk about it and say I'd like to move on now. But it's hard for us to move on because we have literally just found out about it, and it's a really, really bad look from the perspective of being bad optics that the world number one has failed 2 tests. And that is what's happened here. He failed 2 tests for a banned substance and was able to play in Miami. So that is very, very controversial. And what he tested positive for is derived from testosterone. But it was deemed that this was unintentional, but it is still doping, and people need to remember that. That's why he's lost his prize money. That's why he's lost his points. But there is part of a bigger issue here in Italy around this substance, because there have been 5 tennis players who have tested positive for this. And it's also a case that's drawn the attention of journalists, with Edmund Williamson of Honest Sport. We'll put the link in our description, talking about this in May, going to the Olympics, that almost the use of it is similar to the East and West German athletes, but now in Italian sports, with many, many top athletes also falling foul of this, because it does allow you to recover more quickly from cuts as well. And if you are someone who's admitted to having that issue, you can see why someone might be seeing if they can use it, because in small doses, it's very hard to be picked up. Am I saying Jannik Sinner is in any way cheating at this point? No, but do I think that the story makes sense and should be accepted on face value? I do not.
Well, it's been interesting seeing some of the player reactions on social media, and perhaps the strongest opinion, surprise, surprise, has come from Nick Kyrgios, who
Oh,
tweeted
he's back, is he?
he tweeted, ridiculous. Whether it was accidental or planned, you get tested twice with a banned steroid substance. You should be gone for 2 years. Your performance was enhanced. Massage cream, dot, dot, dot. Yeah, nice. We
Mm.
also had Denis Shapovalov say, can't imagine what every other player that got banned from contaminated substance is feeling right now. Different rules for different players. Yeah, it's sort of going to be interesting. I feel like the reactions maybe, or the what the locker room maybe think now of Jannik Sinner the next time he steps into one.
I think it will be very, very mixed.
Mm,
I think Nick Kyrgios probably has a little bit more beef in this sense with Sinner because he is dating his ex-girlfriend, Yannick Sinner, was dating Kellen Sky, who previously dated Nick Kyrgios. So there's definitely a reason there not to be the biggest fan of each other. But he also did get some of the facts wrong there because it wasn't about a massage cream. It was supposedly a treatment on the
mm.
wound that then the hands were used to rub Yannick Sinner with. So it's almost more ridiculous than what he said, to be honest. That what Nick Kyrgios said. I think you have questions, and accepting excuse like this at face value so quickly and keeping
Yeah.
it covered up will
How
not
did,
sit
how
well with
did
many
they keep
people.
it covered up for 5 months? Because that is a long, long time with such a high profile player. It seems to me like how is this not broken sooner? It feels almost like it almost feels planned that
It does.
okay, there's not ever going to be a great time for this news to break. But why not we sort of, as I say, handle the situation and contain it the best we can, and it almost, as I say, kind of feels planned, which doesn't feel, as I say, it doesn't feel right.
But what happened if the result came back differently today? What if he wasn't cleared
Mm,
and he'd been competing this entire time at the French Open, at Wimbledon, in all of these situations? So very, very questionable. Um, do I think that this has been handled? I mean, it's smart the way it's been handled from the Sinner camp and the
mm,
ATP camp, and now everything they can
yeah.
say is fine. But it is not fine that someone is testing positive twice and there are zero repercussions and the excuse is accepted. A lot of players will not be happy with this, and let's
Mm.
hope that it doesn't set a precedent.
Yeah, I mean, just finally, I think as you brought up the Tara Moore case, for listeners, yeah, she was basically put into limbo for 2 years,
Didn't get a hearing,
didn't get a hearing, paid lots of money, to kind of fight her case.
couldn't
Ultimately,
play during that time.
yeah, couldn't play, couldn't make a living, and it really just sort of, I don't want to say ended her career, but it really derailed, her way of, I say, her way
Yeah.
of living,
And they're
and
appealing the decision that's now been cleared. They're going after her again.
yeah,
And
and to see it go that kind of situation to, as I say, Yannick Sinner, world number one, as I
two
say,
failed
almost
tests.
like, yeah, special treatment here. I think that's what I think a lot of people are going to be raising eyebrows out about the fact that, say, it doesn't feel like there's a lot of consistency. Does feel like if you're a higher ranking player, possibly male player, you're going to get a favored treatment. Going to handle it as best we can, and it's going to be a completely different story if you're maybe on the Challenger
300 in the
Tour
world,
or,
Challenger
yeah,
Tour.
ITF Tour,
Exactly.
etc.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen that. And we've seen that person who I think was banned for cannabis as well at a very junior
Mm,
level as well. So it is different rules. It does feel like it's different rules. And I also just think that when it comes to the way this is done, blaming your team for this as well, I
mm.
think your team have to also be an extension of you. That is how it works. So quite often these people do also face repercussions for this as well. So it'd be interesting to see if that person does stay in his team. And if they do, I think there will be even more question marks.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I'm sure there's lots more to come on this story, and we'll have to see how it develops. We'll have to see if the fans react to it as well, in New York at the US Open. But yeah, let's move on. And let's move on to looking at all the action from this week. Starting in Monterrey, the WTA 500. Danielle Collins is the top seed. Emma Navarro is there. Svitolina Alexandrova. Yeah, I quite like this tournament, Chris. A 500 in the build-up last week before. Where are your eyes at on the draw?
I'd love Svitolina to make a deep run here. I think that would be
Yep.
great. I also think it would be really nice if we were to see, a player like Tomjanovic make a deep run. But if I was Emma Navarro, I'd say you probably got no business playing the week before your
That's
home
what.
slam. It's
That's
really
what's the problem.
confusing. I
That's
don't
what the problem
understand.
with these 500s. I think like the immediate week before, the immediate week after, they're just so tantalizing for players. I think to pick up cheap points with draws that maybe aren't as
Yeah.
packed as they could be in another point in the schedule.
Yeah, and for Danielle, it makes sense, Danielle Collins, because she did have that injury. She's been recovering. She wants to play before New York. So that makes sense. But I mean, very odd for some players to pick this. And, tennis in the land is pretty stacked also. It's got Haddad Myers in the mix. That's a 250. Leda Fernandez is playing
Yep.
again. So she's really
Yep.
packing in the tennis.
Yeah. I mean, she's 5-1 up at the moment on Anna Bogdan. Yes, it's very patchwork. It's one of my favoritely named tournaments. Peyton
It's,
Stearns, yeah, it's come
yes,
through today. Sinyakova,
Crete Minin in the draw.
Tormo. Yeah, yeah. So yeah, we'll have to wait and see. That's again quite an interesting one to look at. And we also have Winston Salem, the ATP 250. Sebastian Baez is the top seed there.
It's
Now,
a huge draw.
it's a huge draw. Yeah, they've used all the seedings have been getting a bye. I'm not sure if I quite like this format, to be honest. But yeah, Dan Evans is already out. Annoyingly, I mean, he's not had a great run of form recently. Yeah, any eyes on anywhere in this draw?
Well, I think Chorich has had a good result beating Nagal in the first round. He'll play Baez. That's a really good draw because Baez is not the player he is on a hard court
No.
compared to a clay court. So this one is open for the taking. Also a chance for Navone to get his first ever hard court win, the number 7 seed. So that will be a real test for him going into being seeded at the US Open. But I mean, it would be good to see a player pick up a title here who wouldn't normally if everyone was playing. It feels like someone like Mickelson, that could be a nice one to win for a home story.
Yeah.
But
I was reading about Mackenzie McDonald. I think he was in the doubles final in Cincinnati, and his next match with Salem, which was like apparently it's like a 70-minute flight away. It was like within hours, and it was like I've got no time to wait around. I've got to get to the next tournament. So
he did it. No speeches, just go.
no speeches.
No
exactly.
goodbyes.
Yeah. Well, we'll see. We'll see. I mean, these tournaments are always tricky. I think. Like, do you want to go far? How far do you want to go? Will you withdraw and do Naomi Osaka? So you've got your time and head to New York. We'll have to wait and see. But we are going to end our episode there. We do have our US Open preview coming up on Thursday evening, UK time. It's hot off the draws happening. So join us. Sorry. Kim will be with us as well. We're going to be making some
she's
predictions.
back from holiday.
Back from holiday. Collector Set will be back as well. So really looking forward to that one. But in the meantime, listeners, I hope you've enjoyed our latest catch up, our latest episode of the Tennis Weekly podcast. Remember to subscribe to us to stay up to date on all the action to come with the US Open starting next week. We're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, and all major podcasting platforms out there. And if you like what you're hearing, then make sure to leave us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify.
And do make sure you subscribe to us and like and comment on our YouTube videos as well. You can also follow us on our other social media or email the show. We're on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and X. And the handle for all of those is Tennis Weekly Pod. And as usual, you can always buy our Tennis Weekly merch. That's at etsy.com/shop/Tennis Weekly Podcast. You can always email us at tennisweeklypod@gmail.com. or check out our website, tennisweekly.co.uk.
And we will be back on Thursday for our US Open draw preview. Really looking forward to that one. So I hope you can join us for that. But in the meantime, it's goodbye from Chris.
Goodbye.
And it's goodbye from me. We'll see you again soon.